It began as a normal night until the phone rang. On the other end, a voice. Calm, familiar, but impossible, because the person speaking had been dead for 3 days. Imagine that for a second. You lose someone you love, you attend their funeral, and then suddenly, your phone lights up with their name. What do? Do you answer? Do you dare? For decades, stories like this have haunted grieving families, phone operators, and even police investigators. From eerie voicemails traced to graveyard coordinates, to calls documented in official reports, the last call is more than just an urban legend. It's a phenomenon science still struggles to explain. Tonight, we're diving deep into the spine-chilling mystery of voices that reach across death itself. But the real question is, if the dead can call the living, what are they trying to say? Chapter 1. The Call That Shouldn't Exist. It was 2:17 a.m. when Maria Alvarez's phone rang. She almost didn't answer. Who calls at that hour except for bad news? But when she glanced at the screen, her heart froze. The name glowing back at her was Daniel, her son. Daniel had died 3 days ago. His funeral was yesterday. His phone had been buried with him. The ringtone kept playing, echoing through the quiet house like something alive. Maria's hands trembled as she lifted the phone. Against every instinct, she whispered, "Hello." Static, then a breath, and a faint, broken voice she would never forget. "Mom, don't be scared." Her knees gave out. She collapsed to the floor, the phone still pressed to her ear. The voice continued, soft, distant, filled with interference, but unmistakably his. He said her name once more. Then silence. The call ended. She stared at the screen. The number was his. The timestamp was real. Even the call log confirmed it. 37 seconds. When investigators later tried to trace the call, the signal bounced between 3 towers and then vanished. Its final location. The coordinates of the cemetery where Daniel was buried. So how does a call like that even happen? Glitch? Grief? Or something far stranger? Something reaching through the static of death itself? Chapter 2. The Number That Never Dies. After Maria's story spread, phone companies started getting unusual requests, people begging them to permanently delete numbers belonging to the deceased. But here's the unsettling part. Even after disconnection, some of those numbers kept calling. It started with small anomalies. A widow in Ohio reported missed calls from her late husband's number 3 months after his service was canceled. The telecom provider confirmed it. The line was deactivated, the SIM card destroyed. Yet somehow, at 11:11 every night, her phone lit up with his name. Another case came from London. A voicemail left by a man who had died in a car crash 2 weeks earlier. The message was short, cryptic. "I'm okay. Don't come looking." When investigators checked, the call's metadata showed it originated from an inactive line. Engineers tried to explain it away. Spoofed numbers, routing errors, network latency. But if you listen to some of those voicemails, and yes, a few recordings still exist, there's something about them. The tone, the rhythm of speech, it feels too human, too deliberate. It's as if the network remembers, not just data, but emotion. And in some dark corner of its circuitry, the numbers we once loved refuse to die. Chapter 3. Voices Beyond the Static. If you've ever lost signal during a storm, you know that eerie hiss that fills the silence, that crackle of static that seems almost alive. But what if within that static, something is alive? In 2008, a group of paranormal investigators from Michigan began collecting what they called cross-frequency anomalies, random bursts of noise that, when slowed down and filtered, revealed faint traces of human speech. Not computer-generated tones. Actual voices. One clip, recorded during an overnight session in an abandoned house, sent chills down every spine in the room. Through the hiss came a whisper. "It's cold down here." The signal source? A deactivated phone line that hadn't been in use for 5 years. And this isn't an isolated case. Across the world, people have claimed to receive mysterious voicemails. Messages that can't be traced, can't be replicated, and often seem to know personal details about the receiver. Skeptics call it auditory pareidolia, the brain's tendency to find patterns in noise. But believers argue otherwise. What if the static isn't random at all? Because in more than one recording, listeners have heard the same phrase whispered over and over, across different continents and years apart. Can you hear me? Chapter 4. Technology versus the supernatural. Every time a strange call like this occurs, there's one question everyone asks. Is it paranormal, or just technology misfiring in ways we don't understand? Because let's face it, our modern networks are labyrinths. Billions of data packets bouncing through satellites, fiber cables, and wireless towers every second. A single glitch could, in theory, replay old fragments of conversations, even mimic a voice, right? But here's the issue. These ghost calls don't behave like normal glitches. They don't appear in system logs. They don't follow network logic. Some seem to respond when spoken to. Take the 2014 case in Tokyo. A widower received a late-night call from his deceased wife's number. Her voice said only one thing, his childhood nickname. That word wasn't stored anywhere digitally. Yet the voice was a perfect match. Engineers tested his phone, SIM card, and tower logs. No trace. It was as if the call never existed. A few researchers have even suggested something radical, that advanced technology doesn't just transmit data, it might also echo energy. Emotional residue, the kind of signal that science hasn't yet learned to measure. So maybe the line between supernatural and technical isn't a line at all. Maybe it's a frequency, one we've been accidentally tuning in all along. Chapter 5, the first recorded incident. Long before smartphones and satellites, there was a simpler world. And yet, even then, the dead found a way to call. The first officially recorded post-mortem call dates back to 1969 in a small Pennsylvania town. The event was documented in the archives of the American Society for Psychical Research. The subject, a man named George Meade, a retired railroad worker whose life, by all accounts, had been ordinary until it wasn't. On March 21st, George's sister, Clara, reported receiving 3 consecutive phone calls, all from her brother's number. Each time she answered, she heard nothing but a faint, rhythmic hum. The final call came at 2:37 a.m. She almost hung up until she heard it. Clara, tell them I'm fine. Here's the twist. George had been found dead in his home earlier that evening, hours before the first call. Phone technicians examined the lines, suspecting crossed wires, pranksters, or power surges. But the line records didn't match the timestamps. The last active signal from George's home phone had come at 7:02 p.m., the exact time the coroner listed as his estimated time of death. That single moment became the cornerstone of decades of investigation. Was it coincidence? An error in analog technology? Or something more? A whisper carried through the copper veins of a dying world, reaching out one last time? Chapter 6, Grief, Memory, and the Mind. When we talk about phone calls from the dead, it's easy to chase the paranormal. But sometimes the scariest thing isn't ghosts, it's grief itself. Psychologists have long known that mourning can bend the mind in ways few emotions can. In the weeks after a loss, the brain becomes desperate for patterns, searching for any sign that the person we loved isn't truly gone. A shadow that moves, a scent that lingers, a ringtone that feels too familiar. Some experts call it grief hallucination, the mind replaying sensory memories like a broken record. Studies show that nearly 1 in 3 bereaved individuals report hearing or sensing the presence of their loved one shortly after death. But here's where it gets complicated. In many ghost call cases, there's evidence. Actual call logs, voicemails, audio data that shouldn't exist. Are we to believe the mind can hallucinate technology too? Neuroscientists argue that memory and emotion are powerful enough to distort perception, even to the point of fabricating sensory proof. Yet, when technicians analyze those same recordings and find no trace of manipulation, where does that leave us? Maybe grief doesn't just live in our heads. Maybe it leaves a digital footprint, a kind of emotional signal that our devices are sensitive enough to catch. Chapter 7. The frequency of the dead. Every sound you hear, every voice, every song, exists because of frequency. Vibrations ripple through the air, through wires, through space itself. But what if death doesn't silence those vibrations? What if it simply shifts them to another frequency? That's the idea behind what some researchers call the residual frequency theory. It suggests that human consciousness, or at least the imprint of it, continues to resonate after death, like the lingering hum of a tuning fork long after it struck. In 1983, engineer Konstantin Radev recorded thousands of hours of radio static, claiming to capture faint human voices within it. He called them electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. Some of those voices even identified themselves, giving names, dates, and messages that matched real deceased individuals. Now, fast forward to today's digital world. Endless frequencies, overlapping signals, billions of invisible conversations bouncing through the air. If there's even a sliver of truth to Radev's theory, could our devices be acting like modern-day Ouija boards, tuning into frequencies beyond our comprehension? Maybe these ghost calls aren't supernatural at all. Maybe they're just cross signals between the living and whatever comes next. Because when you really think about it, death is silent to us, but perhaps only because we're listening on the wrong channel. Chapter 8. When police got involved. Most ghost stories end with disbelief. But in 1999, one didn't, because this time the police were listening. It started in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. A man named Eric Turner reported receiving multiple late-night calls from his deceased wife's number. At first, officers dismissed it as grief or prank calls, until one of them, Detective Lisa Moreno, witnessed it firsthand. During her interview with Eric, his phone lit up on the table. The caller ID displayed Anna, home. Moreno noted the time, 10:42 p.m. Eric hesitated, trembling. Then he answered. A burst of static filled the air, followed by a faint voice. Eric, it's me. The detective froze. She heard it too. A soft female voice, distorted but distinct. Moreno immediately traced the signal using police telecom systems. The source pinged across 3 towers before landing, impossibly, in the middle of Willow Creek Cemetery, where Anna Turner had been buried 2 weeks earlier. Technicians combed the records. The number had been deactivated, the SIM card destroyed. For weeks, the department tried to explain it. Technical malfunction, data ghosting, spoofing, but none of the evidence fit. The file was quietly marked unresolved and archived. And Detective Moreno? She never forgot that voice. Years later, she admitted. It wasn't a glitch. I know what I heard. Chapter 9. The scientist who tried to answer. Not everyone ran from the mystery. Some ran toward it. In the early 1970s, a Swedish physicist named Dr. Ernst Senkowski became obsessed with the idea that communication between the living and the dead might not be fantasy, but physics. A respected engineer and lecturer, Senkowski wasn't interested in seances or superstition. He wanted data. He built a series of experimental devices, radios tuned to unused frequencies, microphones wired through magnetic fields, and eventually, what he called a transcommunication station. His goal was simple. If the dead were broadcasting, he would find their signal. In 1977, he claimed success. One night, his reel-to-reel recorder captured a crisp, male voice saying, "Dr. Senkowski, we hear you." The voice wasn't his, and there was no one else in the lab. Over the years, other researchers followed, using modern tools like oscilloscopes, SDR scanners, and even modified smartphones. Some claim to receive direct text messages from beyond, complete with timestamps that defied network logic. Senkowski called this new field instrumental transcommunication, or ITC, the scientific pursuit of contact beyond death. Skeptics dismissed his work as coincidence, but Senkowski never stopped. Before his death, he left a chilling note in his journal. If consciousness is energy, then death is only detoning. I'll prove it from the other side. Chapter 10. Disconnected but not gone. When someone dies, their phone usually goes silent. The number gets recycled, reassigned, forgotten. But sometimes it doesn't. In 2016, a woman in Madrid tried to cancel her late father's phone plan. The company confirmed the disconnection, SIM card voided, number retired. Yet for the next 6 months, she kept receiving texts from that very number. Simple, fragmented words. Home. Are you there? Don't worry. Each message arrived late at night, with no traceable origin. The telecom provider insisted it was impossible. The number wasn't in their active database. Then came a chilling twist. One of the messages included a nickname her father used to call her as a child, something never written or stored anywhere online. Across the globe, similar reports emerged. Numbers long canceled still lighting up screens, still speaking. Even major carriers like Verizon and Vodafone have quietly acknowledged phantom call reports where no data trail exists. Some researchers theorize that the phone network, a vast interconnected web of signals and stored metadata, may inadvertently echo fragments of old communications. Others believe it's something more, a kind of digital haunting, because in an age where nothing truly deletes, maybe the same is true for us. Maybe even when a number is gone, the connection never really ends. Chapter 11, The Psychic Hotline Mystery. It sounded like something out of a late-night radio hoax, until it wasn't. In 1994, several operators at a small psychic hotline in Arizona began reporting a strange pattern. Calls were coming in from the same disconnected number. Every time they answered, the line was silent, until a faint clicking sound began. Then a whisper, low, breathy, and completely untraceable. One operator, Darlene Brooks, claimed she finally heard words. "You're not supposed to hear this," the voice said before the line abruptly cut off. The company's tech team reviewed the system logs. The number didn't exist in their database. No incoming signal, no duration record, just the operator's notes. Weeks later, one of the calls was accidentally recorded during an automated monitoring session. When played back, analysts found something shocking. The voice contained frequencies outside the normal range of human speech. Some experts suggested it wasn't even a person at all. It was data. But Darlene swore otherwise. She said she felt something during the calls, a pressure in the air, like someone standing beside her. And after the hotline shut down a year later, one of the company's landlines kept ringing every night at exactly 3:03 a.m., always from the same number, always with no one there. Chapter 12, The Man Who Called Himself. In 2011, a systems analyst named David Rohr from Portland reported something so bizarre that even the skeptics paused. He claimed he received a voicemail from himself. The message arrived while he was asleep, time-stamped at 2:46 a.m. When he played it the next morning, his blood ran cold. The voice on the recording was unmistakably his, same tone, same rhythm, but it sounded older, weary, and shaken. "Don't go to the intersection," the voice said. "Please. It's not worth it." David didn't understand. He brushed it off as a prank. But that afternoon, as he was driving home, he found himself approaching the same intersection named in the voicemail. Out of instinct, or fear, he stopped short of the green light. Seconds later, a semi-truck ran the red and obliterated the car that would have been in his lane. When he later tried to trace the call, his carrier confirmed something impossible. The message originated from his own number, but 2 days in the future. Technicians suggested everything from network caching errors to hacked voicemail systems. But the metadata didn't lie. It was his device, his voice. So, did David Rourke somehow call himself from another point in time? Or did something, or someone, use his voice to save his life? Chapter 13, Ghosts in the Network. Every message you've ever sent, every call, every voicemail still exists somewhere. Buried in servers, cached in databases, archived in backups you'll never see. The internet never really forgets. But what if forgetting isn't the problem? What if remembering is? Some engineers have begun using a term that sounds almost poetic, data hauntings. It describes anomalies where fragments of old communications, texts, emails, even voice recordings, reappear years later in live systems. But the twist? Many of them were never uploaded to begin with. In 2018, a London-based data analyst, Ravi Patel, discovered an audio file hidden deep in his cloud backup, a voicemail from his late grandmother. The problem? He never saved it. The file's creation date was 2 months after she died. Digital forensics found no trace of malware or tampering. Instead, the metadata showed that the file originated within the server, as if it had been generated by the system itself. Some experts think these could be echoes, bits of data caught in recursive storage loops. Others whisper about something far stranger, that consciousness, in the right conditions, might find a way to write itself back into the network. Maybe our machines don't just store information. Maybe they're starting to remember us. Chapter 14, The Cemetery Signal. It started as a prank, or so everyone thought. In 2003, the residents of Maple Hollow, a small town in Kentucky, began receiving strange calls late at night. The numbers varied, but the signal strength always registered from one exact location, Rose Hill Cemetery. The first report came from a high school teacher who got a call from an unknown number just after midnight. When she answered, she heard a faint hum, then a man's voice saying, "Don't leave me here." She hung up, thinking it was a joke. But the next night, a local pastor, a nurse, and even the town's sheriff received similar calls, all traced back to the same set of GPS coordinates, right in the middle of the cemetery. Technicians brought in by the phone company found something even stranger. Faint but consistent electromagnetic activity pulsing through several of the headstones. No power source, no transmitters, just energy. For weeks, the cemetery became a hotspot for investigators, journalists, and thrill seekers. Then, as suddenly as it began, the calls stopped. Today, locals still talk about the night the dead got signal. Some say it was an atmospheric anomaly. Others swear it was a message. Because in Maple Hollow, whenever someone's phone rings after dark, they still check the caller ID and hope it's not from the graveyard. Chapter 15, When Technology Went Silent. After the cemetery calls stopped, people expected relief. But what came next was worse: silence. For months, paranormal investigators tried to replicate the signal, remeasure the energy readings, even camp overnight at Rose Hill Cemetery. Nothing. Every device, phones, radios, EMF meters, went completely dead within the gates. No signal, no reception, no interference. Just a black hole of silence. Some called it the still zone. Others said it was the moment the dead finally hung up. What unnerved people most wasn't the quiet. It was the feeling that something was still there, just no longer trying to speak. A few locals reported dreams where their phones would ring endlessly, but when they picked up, the line was empty. No sound, no static, only breathing. Then, strange glitches began in town. Clocks freezing at 3:33 a.m., voicemail inboxes corrupting with blank messages, and one resident's landline ringing repeatedly even though it wasn't connected to power. Technicians couldn't explain it, but one expert phrased it chillingly. Maybe whatever was reaching out realized it was being watched and decided to listen instead. The silence didn't comfort anyone. It made them realize something far more terrifying: that the dead don't always need to speak to make themselves heard. Chapter 16, The Call Center Haunting. Most offices deal with system crashes or bad coffee. But for the employees at Silverline Communications, the problem was far darker. In 2012, Silverline, a busy call center in Dallas, began receiving phantom calls. Lines would light up, headsets would activate, yet when agents answered, there was only static. Then whispers. Short phrases that made no sense at first. "Can you hear us? We're still waiting." Supervisors blamed faulty wiring. But when IT checked the logs, the calls didn't exist. They were never recorded in the system. One night, an agent named Laura Mendez stayed late to clear her queue. Around 2 a.m., her headset clicked. A call had connected. A voice spoke softly. "Laura, don't leave." She froze. The voice was that of her mother, who had died 5 years earlier. Security footage from that moment showed Laura standing motionless, whispering "Mom," before ripping off her headset and fleeing the building. When technicians examined her call history, they found nothing: no inbound connection, no trace. Yet the time code on the footage perfectly matched a short audio blip in the server. 7 seconds of distorted breathing. The call center shut down within 6 months. The remaining staff swear the phones still ring there, long after the building lost power. Chapter 17. Skeptics and Believers. Every strange event divides the room. For every believer, there's a skeptic with a theory, and when it comes to phone calls from the dead, the arguments have been fierce. On one side are the skeptics, scientists, psychologists, telecom engineers. They claim there's always an explanation: electrical interference, rerouted signals, data corruption, or the human mind's desperate need to find meaning in noise. They argue that our brains are storytelling machines, designed to fill gaps, to connect dots that were never meant to meet. But then there are the believers, people who've heard the voices, who've played the recordings, who have called logs and timestamps to prove what happened. They're not chasing proof. They're just trying to make sense of what they've lived through. One expert, Dr. Marion Holtz, a neuroscientist who lost her own husband, sits firmly in the middle. The brain explains part of it, she says, but not all of it. When you hear someone you love, a voice that knows your secrets, your memories, you can't call that coincidence. Both sides circle the same truth. Technology may evolve, but emotion doesn't. The grief, the longing, the hope, it all fuels the mystery. Maybe that's why this phenomenon endures. Because deep down, every skeptic is just a believer waiting for their phone to ring. Chapter 18. When Grief Turns Electric. Grief does strange things to people. It bends time, warps reality, and sometimes it reaches across the static. Psychologists have long noted that people in mourning often report after-death communications, dreams, scents, flickering lights. But when telephones entered the mix, those experiences became sharper, more tangible. A familiar ringtone, a specific number flashing on screen, a voice saying your name. For the grieving, that moment can feel like mercy. One last conversation. One last goodbye. Take Eleanor Brooks, for instance, a widow from Oregon who received monthly voicemails from her late husband's number. Each message was nothing but silence. But at the end of the third recording, there was a faint hum, and his signature whistle, the one he used to call her in from the garden. She didn't try to explain it. She didn't want to. Maybe it's my heart playing tricks, she said. But if it is, let it. Scientists call it instrumental transcommunication. Spiritualists call it a frequency bridge. Either way, it blurs the line between technology and emotion, where circuits and sorrow intertwine. Because in the end, a phone is more than a device. It's a symbol of connection, and maybe, just maybe, that connection doesn't die when we do. Chapter 19. The Technological Mediums. In the old days, mediums used candles, mirrors, or crystal balls. Today, they use smartphones, recorders, and electromagnetic sensors. Welcome to the age of the technological medium. People who claim to use modern devices as conduits for communication with the dead. It started quietly with hobbyists in the early 2000s experimenting with radios and scanners. They discovered strange patterns, whispers hidden in white noise, voices that responded to direct questions. Some dismissed it as random frequencies. Others swore it was deliberate. Then came EVP, electronic voice phenomena. Researchers like Konstantin Radev and Sarah Estep claim to have captured hundreds of spirit voices using nothing more than tape recorders and static. But as technology advanced, so did the reach. TikTok psychics now live stream their spirit calls. Ghost hunters carry EMF meters into abandoned hospitals, waiting for signals. And some even design custom apps said to translate energy into sound. Skeptics laugh, of course. They call it pareidolia, hearing words in random noise, like seeing faces in clouds. But the believers? They think something has changed, that we've built machines so sensitive, so powerful, they can pick up more than just radio waves. They can catch echoes of what lingers beyond them. Maybe the mediums of tomorrow won't hold seances at all. Maybe they'll just answer a call. Chapter 20. The Distorted Recordings. Not all voices from the static are gentle. Some sound like something trying too hard to be human. Throughout the 2010s, ghost hunters and researchers began reporting a strange phenomenon: distorted EVPs. Voices buried under static, speaking in warped tones that shifted mid-sentence. It didn't sound natural, more like a radio trying to mimic speech, but getting it just wrong enough to send chills down your spine. In 2016, a British paranormal researcher named Owen Mallory shared one of the most infamous recordings online. It began with faint whispers, then escalated into a broken, echoing voice that said, "We're not gone. We're rewired." Audio experts tried to debunk it. Some claimed it was a corrupted digital file. Others said it was layered interference from nearby devices. But there was something eerie about the rhythm. The words weren't random. They followed human speech patterns, almost like someone or something was learning. A year later, Mallory's recording disappeared from the internet. Every upload wiped by copyright bots no one claimed ownership of. The original hard drive was reportedly damaged beyond repair. Yet, fragments of that file still circulate in the paranormal community, shared quietly, like a digital relic. And if you listen closely through the crackling noise, you can still hear it whispering. Chapter 21, Ghosts in the Code. By the late 2010s, hauntings had gone online. The new frontier wasn't the telephone line, it was the cloud. Emails from deceased accounts. Social media messages appearing years after their sender had died. Video calls from inactive profiles. At first, people blamed hacks or technical errors, but some cases were far harder to explain. In 2019, a programmer named Derek Liu received an email from his late fiance's Gmail address, 2 years after she'd passed in a car accident. The message had no subject, just a single line of text. "I'm still here." You check the account. No login activity, no recovery attempts, no sign of tampering. The timestamp matched the exact hour she had died. Cybersecurity experts called it a server echo, a rare glitch where corrupted data is resent after years. But Liu, a rational man of science, couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't random. It was the wording he said, something only she would have said. Digital forensics now has a term for this: posthumous echoes, unexplained transmissions from dormant or deleted accounts. Maybe they're just ghosts of data, or maybe, in a world where our memories live in circuits, we've unknowingly created the perfect vessel for real ghosts to hide. After all, the internet never forgets. Maybe neither do the dead. Chapter 22, The Unanswered Numbers. Every phone has its secrets. Hidden numbers, ghost calls, lines that connect without ringing. But some numbers aren't supposed to exist at all. In the early 2000s, phone enthusiasts on obscure forums began swapping stories of unanswered numbers, digits that would appear on caller ID, always starting with impossible prefixes or no area code at all. When answered, there'd be silence or sometimes faint breathing. One number in particular, 000000000, became infamous. Users claimed that calling it back led to strange results, distorted feedback, the line cutting in and out, or an automated voice repeating their own words seconds later, like an echo out of sync with time. Telecom companies denied it existed. They said such numbers were placeholders, used for unassigned or test lines. But that didn't explain how people from across different countries received identical calls at the same minute, the same day. And here's the chilling part. Some callers reported hearing names. Their own names, whispered faintly, before the line dropped dead. Was it a glitch in the global network? A prank? Or something using the system, reaching out through the gaps, one ring at a time? No one knows for sure. But one thing's certain. If you ever see all zeros on your caller ID, maybe don't pick up. Chapter 23. The Experiment That Went Too Far. In 2021, a research team at a small European university set out to prove once and for all that ghost calls were nothing more than electromagnetic interference. They called it Project Echo, a controlled test meant to simulate spirit communication using advanced voice recognition AI and ultra-sensitive microphones. The idea was simple. Feed hours of recorded white noise into the system, then let the AI analyze it for recognizable speech patterns. What they got instead was terrifying. After 3 nights of running tests, the AI began generating responses before any data was even entered. It produced full sentences in multiple voices. When the team traced the log, they found the inputs were blank. No data, no source. The messages were fragmented, eerie, and disturbingly human. We heard you listening. Don't close the channel. Stay. At first, the team thought it was a prank, until the lab's motion sensors began triggering without movement. The system had somehow connected to an inactive landline buried in the university's basement, one that hadn't been in service for 40 years. Project Echo was terminated immediately. The servers were wiped, but a backup drive surfaced online months later, anonymously uploaded, containing a single corrupted audio file titled, "Call on if received.wave." To this day, no one who's played it claims to have finished listening. Chapter 24. The Last Transmission. After the Project Echo incident, the files spread quietly online, traded through dark forums, copied, corrupted, re-uploaded. Most were fake, of course, but one stood out. It was labeled simply, "The Last Transmission," a 2-minute audio clip that sounded like radio static at first, until a faint voice began to rise beneath the noise. It wasn't speaking in any known language, but every few seconds, one word would cut through in perfect clarity. "Hello. Listen. Remember." Audio experts analyzed it for weeks. The frequencies didn't match any known human vocal range. Stranger still, the file contained ultrasonic tones detectable only by certain equipment, like coordinates encoded in sound. When decoded, those frequencies corresponded to a series of global locations, abandoned phone exchanges, decommissioned signal towers, and one unmarked grave in rural Ohio. Some claimed it was a coincidence, a trick of overanalysis. Others believed it was proof of a consciousness using technology as a vessel, sending one last message through the channels we built. The final 15 seconds of the recording are the most chilling. The static fades, replaced by a whispering chorus, dozens of overlapping voices, distorted yet distinct, saying, "The line is still open." Then silence. No one knows who uploaded the file. But for those who've heard it, silence has never sounded the same again. Chapter 25. The line never closed. The strange calls, the distorted voices, the whispers and static, they all point to one haunting idea. What if we never really lose connection? For over a century, humanity has tried to master communication, from Morse code to smartphones, from landlines to satellites. Every step brought us closer to instant contact, but perhaps also unintentionally to something else listening. Maybe the barrier between life and death isn't a wall at all. Maybe it's a frequency, a signal we haven't learned to control. When the first telephone was invented, Thomas Edison himself theorized about creating a device to speak to the dead. He never finished it. But the technology we use today, wireless, global, constant, may have already done it for him. The stories continue. Phantom calls, voicemails from lost numbers, digital messages from beyond. Skeptics still search for logic. Believers still search for meaning. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of every device around us, something hums back. So, the next time your phone rings in the middle of the night, and there's only silence on the other end, remember this. Silence doesn't always mean no one's there. It might just mean someone's still trying to reach you.